YNABers, my name is Jesse Meekum, and this is podcast number 35 for You Need a Budget, where we teach you 4 rules to help you stop living paycheck to paycheck, get out of debt, and save more money. Last week, I finished up a 50-miler. We did it in an area called Dark Canyon Wilderness, and that was the reason I've been talking lately in the podcast about backpacking and prepping and planning, a lot of parallels to budgeting. And as I was wandering around the wilderness with a bunch of scouts, I had a lot of time to think and notice some more parallels in action as we were kind of trekking our way around what was an extremely remote area. We saw one other person the entire time, and I was just about at the end when we were almost to the trailhead. There was a guy driving through, kind of off-roading. I'm not sure where in the heck he was going. But it was very remote, and because of that, I was able to kind of sit and think, and, well, not sit, but walk and think and trudge along and think. It was a good time, and we learned a lot. We learned we can do more than we think we can, that we can go a lot further than we originally thought, that it's more mental than physical, and I think there's a lot there as you're trying to get out of debt or save more or just be a little more thoughtful about where your money is going. Just know that you can do more than you think you can. We experienced some unexpected hiccups. One was sand. I didn't realize this in the planning process, but about 85% of the trail was pretty much like beach sand, which meant that the going was much slower than we anticipated. Blisters happened a lot faster. I was thinking about when you develop a plan. I've been planning this trek for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I felt like I really knew the area. I felt like I had a good grasp on what we needed to do and how long it would take and all of that stuff. And then when it came down to it, something unexpected cropped up, and we just had to kind of mow through it. And if you've got a debt plan that you're working on, something unexpected is going to happen, like 5 minutes after you set up your plan. It's kind of like someone starting a running program and then they get shin splints a week later. Or maybe they get a cold or something. There's always something to kind of throw a wrench into newborn plans. And so just be aware of that and be ready to deal with it. We just trudged through, went a little slower. Speaking of going slower, we realized that, we were stopping about every half mile, which was way too slow to make good time to our next campsite. And so we developed a strategy with the boys, and we basically said, you cannot stop. You can only go slower. And then we would set a time limit. We'd say, okay, we're going to go for an hour without stopping. We're going to go for 2 hours without stopping. The final day, we actually set a time limit. We said we wouldn't stop for 3 hours. And if you felt tired, if you needed to catch your breath, then you would just walk slower. Sometimes we were walking really slow. I called it a mosey a lot of the time, and kind of a meandering through the sand. There are times when you cannot keep the pace that you have prescribed for yourself. Maybe it's in your debt paydown strategy. Maybe it's you're cinching a little too tight, and the pace is not sustainable. There is something to be said for short-term craziness and trying to move the needle with some drastic measures over a short period of time where you're recognizing that the pace is not sustainable. But other times when you've got a 50-miler facing you, you want to make sure that you keep a pace to know that you'll reach the end. And that has everything to do with being realistic about what your goals are, what your daily tasks will be, everything to do with that versus just pacing yourself along the way and managing your own expectations. My favorite part about our trip was the shortage of water. That part in particular, it was stressful, but I had studied and read from various hikers that had given lots of descriptions about where we could find water. We were going fairly late in the season for water to be plentiful, and water was not plentiful at all. I was glad we had filters. We were basically filtering from stagnant water. Sometimes there were frogs sitting in there looking up at us. We all survived. The water didn't look good, but then once you filtered it, it tasted fantastic. What I loved about the water shortage was every day we were hiking to new water. That was the only purpose. We had one single solitary goal, and that was to find the next water hole. And I love that aspect. I talked about this in a prior podcast about not cutting my hair when I have a single goal in mind. And that's exactly what I loved about this water. It was this simple existence. We existed. We walked so we could find more water. There was something very cleansing about that, and kind of helped us feel everything was simpler. You know, these boys that go on these treks and they've got all sorts of gadgets and things back at home and all sorts of worries. But then we got them for 5-6 days, and all they had to think about was, where do I find my water, and how do I filter it, and how do I keep going? I loved that. So as you set your sights on some kind of a financial goal, keep in mind just to try and simplify everything around you. Try and make that your sole focus. And I know I'm a dad and a husband and recognize that you can't have a sole focus. But if you can prioritize appropriately and simplify around you to the point where you can give that a lot of your attention, I feel like it will make the possibility of you reaching your goal increase tremendously. So those were just a few lessons I learned from my backpacking trip last week. Thought I'd pass them along and tie back into budgeting. I tied pretty much everything back into budgeting because it is awesome, and awesome people do it. Until next time, follow YNAB's 4 rules and you will win financially. You have not budgeted like this.